All right, I want to welcome you to podcast here, Johnny and Jennifer Scott, and we're doing a parenting podcast. This is launched kind of week 4 or 5 here
This
for
is
our
our
church,
fourth podcast so far.
and just really felt the need for us as we're parents and grandparents from 25 years old down to 9-year-old, parents of kids we've had made, parents of kids that
We've adopted
and we're blessed by
a grandbaby.
them and grandbaby and a grandbaby on the way. So like we're in a season of parenting. We're also, parenting
Well,
never
and
ends.
just a disclaimer, you might get interruptions. We're sitting outside and one kid's riding on a motorized car.
Yeah.
It's a little crazy. So we're in the thick of, I think what you mean is we're in the thick of
Yeah,
parenting
I'm trying to create that.
at all levels. And I think, we want to talk about some of the questions that came in today are kind of specific to age level. Which I think is helpful. I think for you and I, when we've parented we're actually at my big sister's house. I was here a couple weeks ago doing a podcast, and we're back.
Which is rare. We're not always back in
here.
Indiana. This
We
is
are.
once a year-ish.
We're in Indiana, and we're here for your father's funeral.
Today, my father's funeral.
Yeah. And we're here, it's interesting when you step back in. This is where I grew up. You grew up part of your life. I think when you step back into your hometown a little bit, when you've left and you come back, lots of feelings and emotions come up. And I think being here for your father's funeral, reminiscing with some old friends about how we grew up, and just remembering the blessings that we've had in our life.
And driving kids around and telling them stories of things they don't care about. And some of them do. And sometimes they do about weird things and not always the most important things. But all those themes, we want to give you just kind of a list of the questions on this podcast. But I think that setting is important because it pulls us all in and helps us relate. Questions today, I'll just give you the main topics, not read them. Interacting with your teen, role of teen change as kids grow, disagreements with spouse on all kinds of issues with children. And then healthy boundaries with grandparents, other family members. So let's dive in. Read the official first question.
Okay, so the first question is how to get your teens to keep talking to you and sharing with you. Ooh, that's a fun one. You know what's interesting? All three of our older kids, and now with Marielle being a teenager as well, they all have different personalities. So I think the first thing I want to speak to on that, and then you can dive into, is you have to know what language your kid speaks. Like what keeps them excited. Find out. Take time to listen and to learn your children and to know. Like our oldest son is really into the digital world and creating video games, and you hate video games.
Yeah,
we hate it, but we know that it's a passion of his. And so speaking the language of your children, and I think the way you keep that going, and it's tough, there are going to be years where you don't have it. There are going to be years or months, or depending on the kid, maybe not at all, where it will shut down for a while, because your kids, as they get older, will naturally need to break away from you. That is the healthy process of them eventually leaving home and going out on their own. So I think understanding there will be times where communication's bad, and then continuing to learn how to communicate.
And I think that the point that all of our kids are different, and in the family, we're here on a big family trip, 20 some grandkids, they're all different, and the parents are all different. But one of the things that's a through line from you and your sisters and the kids and all our kids is their ability to talk with and deeply communicate in sincere, authentic, life-giving, rich way with parents and older people. I think one of the keys in that, as I look at all these kids, is it doesn't matter the personality, it doesn't matter the interest, it's keeping at it. I think keeping at it is the thing. And always keeping that bridge of communicating. My kids are in the things I don't care about. My kids are in the things I don't like. Their dad does things that none of them like. But it's weird how, while I don't care about video games or computer stuff, what we found as we continue to talk about it is we care about narrative and story, and how God interacts with narrative and story. And you know what that takes? Time of me investing in the things that they like, where I'm like, oh, there is a vein of this that I care about. And then we meet in that thing there.
I would say, okay, so it depends on where you're coming into this conversation. So if you have teens already and you are lacking conversation with your teens and they're pulling away from you and there's potential of they're hiding things and those kinds of things. if you've not created a culture of sitting around and chatting or talking together as a family, I think that's something you can bring in. I would say, and we've not had to do this, we are a family that talks a lot. We're a talkative family. And you will spend hours on the back porch with the kids talking, but you've been doing that most of their lives. And so if you haven't been doing that, I think you can pull your kids together now and say, you know what?
It's a new day.
I think that's a great way. I think apologizing even to your kids and saying, or however, it's not an apology necessarily, but just an invitation to say, hey, you know what, who we want to be maybe isn't who we've been.
But also this question, I view this question coming from even us as parents. Are like, so-and-so's just quiet. They're just quiet. And they're down and they're groggy. He's like, how you doing? And they're like, fine. And you're driving on the way to school and you're trying to get into their life. You're doing all this. And they're earbuds in and this on. There are times, let me just give you like some very private. There are times where we're on a trip or we're all in the car together.
We're not talking
and we say, buds out. Well, I don't want to listen to that, but we're all going to listen to the same thing now. And there's times where, here's the word, we're invasive and it gets awkward. Like, this is awkward. You've got to be okay with them not liking a thing, because there are tons of things that I didn't like. And, even going home to my house yesterday and taking my kids with me, I'm remembering things I didn't like. My parents didn't always ask me if I liked it.
Well,
I love it.
I tell the boys now, you don't have to like this right now. You're going to do it. You can grow up and do it differently when you have a home. But right now, this is how we're going to do it. And Johnny, in the car, when we're on road trips, he'll often say, your earbuds out. We're going to listen to my music. Because growing up, we all didn't have the choice. We had to listen.
One music.
We had to listen to Kenny Rogers.
But that's why we like it now. And I'll make the joke. What do I always tell them, Jen?
I don't remember.
I'll be like, well, one of these days, you're all going to like country music,
It's
whether you
true.
like it or not.
And it's happening.
And they're like, no, we won't. I said, yeah, I will, because I'm going to get old and I'm going to die. And then you're going to listen to country music because you're going to miss me. And they're like, oh, my goodness, Dad, you've got to be so ridiculous, drastic, right? But forcing those moments. So if you're that person out there and you wrote this, like, we're just not connecting. And they won't open
Keep trying.
Not everyone's going to be like, Mom, I want to share all my feelings with you. They won't. It doesn't.
We're
mean
going
you
to
don't
kind of
stop
hit on
being
this
invasive.
this Sunday. We're kind of ending the series about how to keep going and to not give up and being resilient parents, because that's a big word in our home right now, being resilient. But I would just say keep trying. Be gentle, be patient, be graceful. Don't be angry. I think if you try to communicate to your kids and you're angry, they're shutting you out immediately. So if you're wanting to engage conversation, like set aside the guilt trips, set aside maybe invite yourself into the conversation of saying, I haven't been a good communicator lately. I've been tired. I mean, this happens to me a lot. I'm a little bit introverted and I like my alone time a lot, and sometimes I like it a little too much. And so if communication isn't happening really well with Marielle specifically, or Mariano, it's because I'm tired. and so I think I have to make myself sometimes to get up and engage in conversation. So I think be graceful with yourself, be graceful with your kids, invite new things into your life. I think we are so afraid to start something new because we've not done it for 20 years. And I think it's a beautiful thing as a family to declare, we're going to change who we're going to be, and we want to be more like this or like that.
And we are going to read the next question, but there was a theme today that I wanted to run through these questions. And one of it was a theme that's in the Old Testament that the gospel cures, and that is the theme of generational sin. And I'm thinking about that now because I'm going to my father's funeral today, and I'm thinking about my father's father and my grandfather's father. And I barely remember my great-grandfather, but I do remember the house and the aura, the feelings, and my grandfather and my dad, and now my kids. And they're at this funeral today, largely in part to walk it with me, okay? Because we live far away from my grandfather, my dad, and we just didn't have that relationship where we are with each other in the homes all the time. And here's what I want to tell you. Jennifer said, don't be afraid of that. There is a concept from the book of Jeremiah, from the book of Exodus, of generational sin. But the gospel changes everything. And when we look at what Ephesians says about the family unit, I've said it time and time again, a parenting podcast or a parenting sermon series is actually a marriage.
It's all of it.
Series. You're like, well, I'm a single parent. But the implications thereof, the loneliness in that,
No, I think
they're all together.
Well, no, I think it's a reflection. It's a time of parenting series brings up a time of reflection on a lot of different
life,
on a lot of friends. So if you're not married now and you don't have kids now, I think it brings up, like we started this series saying this is going to dredge up some stuff, and there's going to need to be some healing. And you and I have had to go through some of our own healing in the season with you losing your dad and just walking through difficult things as your parents are aging, and that it's dredging up who you are, and you start reflecting, especially in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you're reflecting on who you are, and it is so much about how you were parented. And I think what I wanted you to catch on that, and you were going there, is it's okay to say, you know what, that's what it was, and I'm gonna forgive that, or whatever you need to do for healing in that. And we're gonna go, you always say point, traject, to have the arrow going somewhere.
And
Did I cut you off? Where were you going?
No, totally, Jen. But be
know.
falling forward. You know, I've looked at my boys, and I've looked at my dad, and you know, this whole boomer. I talk a lot to boomers because we have this silver tsunami of retiring boomers.
Yeah.
My dad is in that group, and there is something about the builder generation of like, well, they don't talk about it. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about it, right? And then how the boomers like respond to that, and then Gen Xers, and there is this thing in the Old Testament because it's in our path today. And I think what we have to grapple with is forgiveness of the past. And you say it all the time. We're wounded. Understand our woundedness, but then see God's healing in it, and then try to position our kids just one step healthier, right? And that's okay. It's okay. And so
if you move that dial even a little bit to a healthier direction from where you came from, I know I've shared a lot of conversations with just people struggling with, you know, different issues with their parents, and I think the generational piece, I think if there's some forgiveness that needs to happen. I'm not talking about the abusive stuff. Now the abusive stuff, that's a whole nother level.
That is different.
But I'm just talking about when we complain about our parents, and we complain about some of the parenting that we've received. I think you have to be you got to be careful with that. This is going to lead into my next question. Be careful what you say about your parents in front of your kids. Because
you're modeling it.
You're modeling it. And I think there's some things that we have to say about my parents parented me with the skill set that they had. It's different than how I parent. And I reacted to their parenting in a new way. And we all did. Our generation reacted to their generation differently. And my parents reacted to their parents were in the Depression. We were talking about this on Sunday. Their parents came out of the Depression in a season of just terrible. Can you imagine parenting through, you know, financial crisis and all, I mean, which I'm sure some of us have, but I'm just saying,
not on that scale.
How you parent, it's often generational, and be forgiving of previous generations. They had the skills that they had, and I don't think you can parent well until you kind of let some of that.
It's funny how this one
go.
simple question, though, it's a question of how do I get my kid to talk to me more? And
Yeah.
the weight that's carried on that to who you are and who your parents are,
Yep.
and what you're yearning for in a communication with a child, and the fear of what will this be one day? Will they go away and not be with me? One of the reasons I call my parents,
It's because you want your kids to hear you. He's so much better at this. I love you, Mom and Dad. I'm a terrible phone talker, but you used to call your mom you don't do it as much anymore because you're too busy, but you call your mom a lot in front of the boys.
I've texted my mom every day in the last 4 days, and my stepdad, and because I'm also modeling something, you know. But go ahead, read this
the next question is,
they'll go together.
Yeah, it does. How does your role change as the kids get older? It's new for us. We've got a 24, you said 25, he's 24. We've got a 24-year-old and a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old who thinks he's 35. All of that's true. How do you parent differently? There is an incredible book, and I think we linked it on the first podcast, but it is basically the concept of the book is it's how to parent your adult children. And it says to have a giant welcome mat and to shut your mouth. Okay, so let's talk.
Team proofing?
No, the name of the book is how to parent your adult children. But on the front, there's a giant welcome mat. Yeah. And so one of the things, I'll just talk about me and then you can talk about your side of it. Food. I think how you parent your older kids is you feed them and you invite them into your evenings and your days and you take them to dinner and you pay for them a lot. We pay a lot of money for food. We do. We spend a lot of money on food. But we want our adult children around. So that means for Riley and Mallory, we invite them over, and Rain, and we feed them and we play games and we invite them into our time and our space, and we pay for a lot of things. I think that's the big welcome mat. You're always welcome. We always want you. And even with the girlfriends, you invite the girlfriends and you bring them close. Even if you don't like the person that your child is dating, bring them super close and just be welcoming and gracious. And then when they ask an opinion, you give it. This is the hardest piece. I think your adult children need you to stop giving your opinion as much as you are listening. And then when they ask you, and I think you can even say this, are you asking me for my opinion on this? And clarify, because they will respect your respect for them. And that's just kind of like the concept of the book, is to respect your children, give them the opportunity to grow up and think through things on their own. Okay, you go, your turn.
I love this question, and I want to look at it from little kids, then elementary kids, and then I want to give you like a tool that we're trying to put over it. And I'm seeing it now in my 25-year-olds, and that is consistently driving my kids to the Word of God in this way. One of the things I said to the kids when they're very young, and I've said it in the last week to my 9-year-old, is we talk about them becoming an independent grown-up. Like that process of individuation, they say now it's 28 years old in America for someone to feel like I'm grown up. And
the digital imprint on their life has changed the age. It's moved it back.
It has moved it back a little bit. But we're aiming for that target from very young. Imagine, like when they're really young, I think we do a better job about this. Like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, all of that question comes back to walking with them. And there are Bible verses and stories and things that we put in print on our kids at different ages. You know, Jesus's treatment of people and the Beatitudes and some of the New Testament stories are incredible for little kids. It's some of the adventure stories in the Old Testament when they're elementary and teens. But then they get to be late teens in the Song of Solomon and sexuality and what Song of Solomon has to say about that, and marriage, and what courting is really for, and larger topics like the fear of the Lord and things. Here's my point. I think that always helping them realize that you're a guide in their life to help them land somewhere. Your kids want to be grown up. And when we position ourselves and say to our 9-year-old, I'm doing this one day because you're either going to be a lawyer or need a lawyer. So we joke around a little bit, you know, that whole joke with kids. But he gets it. And he's continually saying, like, oh, so you're not here to dominate me. You're not here.
Well, there are seasons of dominance. I mean,
different subject though.
Yeah, right. That gets lesser as you get older. No, it's the same subject though.
Yeah, but here's my point. Here's my point. For these kids that are trying to figure out what's your role as I grow in stages, as we continue to let them know, I'm here to serve you. And I'm not here because I don't want you to mess up so I look bad in front of my friends. I don't want you to mess up so I've got to stop at work and take time from what's important to me to come mess with your mess up. When we stop that hurt and pain and position ourselves as I'm here to serve you, we have their ear. And then we can go from stage to stage to stage with health. But it starts with this. Here's the key. Point the target. I'm going to help you become an adult. And when they start to trust that more and more, they'll trust you with information of what's going on with their friends that other kids won't tell their parents, because they know that you truly put yourself in an advisory role that thinks of their best interests first.
It's a dance.
It's a dance.
It's a dance. It's tight. It's a tight, close dance when they're little, and then you give them a little space as they get older.
Yeah.
And then sometimes as they get older, you pull them closer again. Like there have been seasons, and not to divulge anything like, but it doesn't mean that your 24-year-old is going to have it all figured out and only come to you and it's not all chummy all the time. There are times we've had hard conversations with our adult children about their marriage, and there are hard conversations that still happen.
Yeah, like
but
we've come in like hard parents sometimes, like, hey, I gotta say this to you.
There are times where I'm just like, listen, you need to blah blah blah, whatever the thing is, and because there are only some things that we can say.
So how do you know, Jen?
I don't.
When you do it?
I don't, and sometimes I make mistakes. Like, okay, I'm gonna give a really funny example real quick about parenting. So I have a beautiful daughter-in-law, Mallory. She's fantastic, and she's a great mommy. And this is where it gets hard. So your daughters-in-law and sons-in-law won't parent oftentimes the way you do. And so I worry about him being cold all the time, and she worries about him being hot all the time. And so our joke, even though I'm sure it can be annoying to her at times, is that I'm like, maybe you should put socks on him, or this generation doesn't use blankets.
Do you have a blanket?
Do you have a sleep sack? I'm worried about him being cold at night, and so I have to temper my words with that, because I want her to want my opinion, and I want her to ask me. And I think that's one of the situations with adult kids where you have to allow them to make some mistakes, and then be ready to help them and pick them up when they need you. And hopefully they will come to you. And if they don't have a habit of doing that, just pray for it. I think prayer is healing.
And there's two things on this that I would say walk hand in hand. One, trust the Spirit of the living God and ask the Spirit when to push in. At every age. 4-year-old issues, 24-year-old issues. But here's number two, and they walk hand in hand. And this is where I think a lot of people miss the opportunity to build a bridge. When you mess up, apologize. Do you know the power of a parent looking at a 6-year-old and saying, man, Dad just made a mistake there. And I wish I could take that back, but I'm sorry. Your 6-year-old starts to have more grace for you.
They can see you as a person. I think you got to tell your kids that you're a person. Yeah.
But when that happens, when they're 10 and then 16 and then 19.
Well, it allows them to feel less
they can
shame about their mistakes. They can come to you. I will say this. You want your kids to come to you, and they come to you with something, please, please, please hear me when I say this. Do not freak out. If you freak out about your teenagers and they come to you and there might be some really tough stuff, the best thing that you can do is keep a calm peace. And we've talked about this a lot, a calm peace, a calm, just trusting the Lord with, I don't know, the scary things, trusting God to handle that very big, scary thing, and you can be a calm, safe place for them to land. And they'll come to you. I tell you, if you do not panic and you can handle some things, they need to know that you can handle some things, that will help.
Because the world panics.
That's right.
And when I love that you went there, Jen. Even if they come and say, hey, I'm thinking about maybe I'm not, they're born a girl and I like girls, something like that. To where if you're losing your mind, you lose all ability to be, and some kids,
they won't come to you, they'll shut down.
Good kids will do dumb things. And sometimes they'll try things on for a season that's not who they are, not where they want to go.
Right.
And your ability to be like steady and peace and abiding in the Lord allows that bellwether, like you're going to carry them through a rough season. And
as they get older and they're making those decisions, if they can't come to you, they won't. And they don't have to. As your kids get older, they don't have to come to your house anymore. They don't. And you want them to want to choose you, have a lot of food, feed them, take care of them, and keep that welcome mat big and your mouth slightly shut. How to handle when your spouse disagrees on things like what movies this is a good one, what movies they can watch, how late they can stay up, etc.
Oh man, we've never done that. It's gonna be hard for us to talk about. We've never disagreed on parenting.
I feel like we need to tell everybody we agree on everything.
This is a great question.
No, that's not
and
true.
You know, it has nothing to do with a believing spouse, a non-believing spouse, age of spouse. You're gonna disagree. You're gonna disagree a lot. And
you and I, we have had some. We've had some definite different.
We're just very different.
Yeah.
And praise God for it, because I've been wrong in some of my ways. And there's also been some things where I think, that you've been so wrong.
No. Don't you know? When the dad is wrong, and the mom is right, the mom is right. When the dad is right and the mom is wrong, the mom is right.
Yeah.
When the dad is wrong and the mom is wrong, the mom is right. That's how this goes.
I've seen the chart. A few things I would say on this, and it's different for different ages, different for different things. You've got to figure out as a spouse, the long ball. These kids are going to grow up, and eventually there's going to be a third voice in the argument, what they think about it. And so I would say this. Here's the overarching. And there are extremes. So, we're not talking about something that would harm a child, like, letting them play with something or do something that, it's like crazy. But like within make just smaller disagreements. Here's my kind of overall band-aid on this. Your ability to stay tight with your spouse is a greater gift to your child. Say it's the person here I think even mentioned movies. There are some movies that I would let my kids watch at a younger age.
But I was like, oh no, you're not.
Didn't want to. But as a boy, boys and girls are different. I'm like, no, Saving Private Ryan, World War II happened. Killing and murder are two different things.
Okay, you don't
bravery,
need to go into details.
No, but wait, we're political on this. We're kind of honest. Bravery and giving one's life and loyalty between people and sacrifice and justice and honor, and these are big topics for young men at 7, 8, 9. I would probably let them watch that earlier than she would, versus something like Zack and Cody.
Oh, the Life of Zack and
which
Cody.
is the TV show on Disney that we would think is, well, that's no problem for kids. So no, there's no dad involved. The mom is always too busy for the kids. They run around in a secret world where
They run their own lives. Like,
they
where are the
never
parents?
talk to a
We
parent
say this
enough.
a lot. Like, where are the parents in some of these the Disney shows? I think are the ones that we agree
Because
on.
they
We're
tell
like,
kids
ugh.
that your little social network is really what's important.
Well, and it's
And
focused on relationships, and it's focused on things that are too young,
Jennifer,
too soon.
romanticizing other boys being excited about girls too early, and that show for me was more dangerous than Saving Private Ryan. We disagreed on the age, but here's the question though. Is like, what do you do when you disagree? Here's my answer. My relationship with Jennifer and being lockstep with Jennifer is more important than me getting my way on most issues for this reason. Nothing will cause harm or insecurity to a child more than mom and dad
Not getting along.
not getting along. My first and deepest memory as a kid was at 6 when my parents were going to go through a divorce. They did not. And I cried out to God. I remember a night. I remember the trauma. I remember the sadness. And that was more traumatic than, it's like the first time I saw porn.
Yeah.
Right? And from a neighborhood kid at 12. That was more traumatic than the first time I saw racial violence. Some of these things that are shocking to a child, where it's like, right?
You think those would be the life-altering
My
moments?
parents letting me go over here, go over there. My parents not being together. So I would challenge you on this.
It's big.
We'll fight, and this is, if you look at Ephesians, when Ephesians says, here's how you run a family, it doesn't say parenting and this parent relationship and the marriage is over here and the kids are over here. It puts it first and it makes it most important, because if that's solid, God will, you can even go to kids later and talk about it. Say your spouse lets them do something and you don't like it. Sit down and say, what do you think about that? And process through it. And then talk to them about the reasons not that you disagreed with your spouse, but maybe some of your concerns, right?
Well, I think our worst parenting moments are when we have, in front of the children, argued.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think someone said it once, and I don't remember where I heard it, but be adult enough to take that to the bedroom and talk about it, or go out to dinner, and when you're calmed down, talk about it. It's going to happen. I think you're human. I think this is one of those apology moments where if you do... It's usually probably me more than Johnny.
No, that's not true. I've had to apologize to our boys in private to say this. I didn't honor your mom.
Yeah.
In a way I want you to honor your mom. And I've repented to my boys.
Well, and I would say, I'm going to talk from the female perspective. So this is going to seem a little archaic and a little outdated. I believe in equality. I do. I think God loves me as much as he loves the male. He loves the female as much as he made me in the image, just like he made you in the image, but he did set up order. God is a God of order. And so I'm going to speak to the wives in this for a second. This is a very unpopular topic. There is a submission that has to happen from me. And I am, girls, seriously, ladies, I am dominant. I am overbearing. I am power. I can be. But my power misappropriated can flip the switch in our home. And I know that. And I'm raising men. I'm not raising girls. I'm raising men. And so I see the need for respect in their life. And this is one of the hardest pieces. This is just the truth. The hardest piece for me, because I am strong and strong-minded to allow you to be the top boss. And I have, in their lifetime, I had an older mom used to refer to her husband as the top boss. And I even reluctantly still say those words, and it grates against me at times to say it. But when the kids ask me something, sometimes I use it as it helps me out. Like, I have to ask Dad, he's the top boss. But there's something about setting, even if it's not a non-believing, I think this is actually, I don't know how to say this, but I think it can save your family. Even if your husband's not a believer, to make him the top boss is going to show him your love for the Lord. I think that's true. And I think when you place him in the right position in the home, it course corrects some things, and your boys need to see it. Your girls need to see that modeled well. And it blesses you more than you realize. I think and I'm not laying down who I am as your wife. I am still as strong and capable by allowing you to be considered in our home the top boss.
Equality in value is not sameness.
It's not sameness. That is so
equal in
That's good.
value.
Wait,
well,
say that again.
But that is the argument.
Equality and value are not sameness.
So you're valued equally to the Lord.
Absolutely.
Your opinion is valued. Everything is valued equal, but you are different. And different tools. Sometimes men are
You
a
give me
hammer.
power. Like the beautiful part of this is, I would say, my ability when I'm good at this, and again, it's a struggle. I struggle with this a lot, to lay down my rights. But this is what Christ did. Christ laid down his rights. If you read Philippians 2 for 5 seconds, go there. It talks about Christ's humility. This isn't a guy versus girl. He modeled laying down. So I don't think that it's in front of your kids. It's not best to fight your right to say what you think you need to say. There's a right time for those conversations. And I think when I, as a female in our home, modeling for my boys what a submissive wife looks like, and for my daughters that are coming up in and around me, that is just something I desire. I desire to be biblically accurate in my motherhood and in my wife role.
And I think about the person who wrote this question. And if we were having coffee with them right now, and we say we knew the issue that maybe you and a spouse disagreed upon for how to train up a child, I would always probably go to this one behind the issue. Is there fear involved in, well, we're going to make Junior do this, or I want Junior to do this, and spouse wants Junior to do this? It doesn't matter what it is. I would back it up and say, what fear is there if you do what your spouse wants on all of this? And I'm even thinking about big examples here. At some point in your spouse relationship in rearing children, you have to ultimately understand that if you honor God here first in your spouse's relationship, he is big enough to handle the mistakes we make as parents.
Absolutely.
And mom and dad being
your
good
posture in
covers over a lot.
Obedience to what God has said in his word about marriage, about...
Well, I don't want him to play sports. Well, I don't want this, right? I mean,
there are some things I'm going to have to die to.
There are some things.
And there's some things you're going to have to die to.
And have.
Yeah. But the main key here, I would say, is this: don't figure these things out in front of them. Go get a counselor. Honestly, if it's real bad,
we take the bill.
We've gone to counseling when it's been
We'll be back.
divided in a way that we can't mediate ourselves.
I go alone sometimes.
Yes,
We've sent our kids as couples and alone.
Yep.
And so we don't just say, get a counselor. No, we do it.
No, get a
Christian
get
counselor.
a Christian biblical counselor and let that help guide you.
And no doubt we could talk more on that.
That's a really big one. That's a marriage talk.
Yeah.
Like you said,
but
parenting is a marriage.
This is why this weekend, this sermon this weekend is going to be a big deal.
You're not going to want to miss it.
It's going to bless mothers. We're going to honor mothers this weekend because we're coming up on Mother's Day. But it's also going to be very important, I think, as it's kind of like the capstone on this parenting series. How to set, last question.
This is hard.
How to set up healthy boundaries with grandparents and other family members.
Ooh. This is hard because there's a people pleaser.
Healthy boundaries. There's a lot in that question. And we don't know.
Did my daughter-in-law write this, Mallory? Is it you?
We don't. Hey, we don't know.
I don't know
who's writing this and the complications involved and what's appropriate. And so I just want to back up on the whole question with some overarching Bible. Okay? Here's some overarching Bible. The idea in the Bible of honoring.
I knew you were going there.
Honoring mothers and fathers and grandparents and aunts and uncles. You have a finite, if I say, list your family tree, it's only as big as it is. And if your family tree is like my family tree, there's crazy ones, there's awesome ones, there's fun ones, there's draining ones, and I'm all of those at sometimes. But get this, we all have to be from somewhere. And there will be times when you set boundaries up that are appropriate, and you need to do that. But I think that we're in an over-boundaried culture right now. And it's being said, and I don't know, listen, don't get mad at me. I don't know your situation, and you might need to set a healthy boundary.
You can disagree with this.
Book a private meeting. We'll talk about your specific things. But here's what I'm going to say. We're in an over-boundaried culture. And a lot of people are talking about boundaries, and what they're really saying is, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. And the bottom line is, it's pride and selfishness. I don't want to give of myself and my time. No, I said, I'm being dogmatic.
There are definitely unhealthy situations you don't want your kids around.
There are, and we've done that. I'm
Definitely.
pushing that aside. I'm talking to overarching. And here's what will happen. Imagine your kids get around an uncle who drinks too much. I'm just going to get real specific. Or an uncle that, man, we don't let people watch our kids. We don't put our kids around people.
There's a difference between hanging around and babysitting. Like,
Yeah, there is.
Who you let babysit your kids, that's a whole other conversation.
There are a lot of times when we go to family functions, I got to pull a young kid of mine aside and say, hey, listen, you're about to learn a lesson today. Do you see how so-and-so treats so-and-so's spouse?
Yeah, that's good.
Man, and I have this picture. The book of Proverbs is this. Dad taking a child, daughter, son, and saying, do you see what's going on over there? Well, that's not what God wanted. And kids see it and they're like, man, that does hurt me. And man, that hurts them. And man, they're only doing that because they're hurt. And I know why they're like that because so-and-so's like, and your kids start to get this, not information.
Right.
Wisdom is knowledge applied. That's what wisdom is.
Like, use life examples to teach your kids about drugs and alcohol. Like, if you have that in your family, again, I would never say let an uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa who has an issue with that. That's not what we're saying. We're saying there's a little bit of letting your kids
here's what
be
it
around
is.
things.
So-and-so comes by too much. So-and-so is over too much. So-and-so does this. So-and-so they speak it. A lot of this is we can boundary ourselves into so much personal comfort that our kids misinfluence. And I'm probably the most hot on this one because I've seen the idea of boundary creation as an excuse to selfishness.
Lack of community and isolation.
Yeah, which is what we're dying for. And I'm seeing a great need of boundaries to be put into place in some areas, and boundaries stripped away in other areas.
So I'm in a season, and you and I have talked about this because we have some friends and even ourselves with family members that we've said, that's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. I think I personally love healthy conversations. I don't think you can, and again, abusive stuff is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you have an offense against your mother-in-law or your father-in-law or your mom or your dad or your aunt or whoever it is in your family that you feel like you need a healthy boundary with. Have you gone to that person in biblical resolution? Read Matthew 18 if you need to, or just the heart of Christ that talks about having compassion and care for one another more than you do yourself. And have you gone to that person and said, hey, when you, whatever, it's hard for me to want my kids around you. And that's a tough thing to say. But if you do it in love and your motive is to resolve and to have love and unity,
Amen.
because we're not just talking about unity in the church, unity in the family. For your children and for you and for your heart and posturing right before Christ, you stand before Christ with your response to what your family has done to you, and how you treat people. This is tough, and I'm telling you right now, there are moments when I'm not good at this. This is tough because we don't want to offend, and we are people pleasers, and we don't want to. But if you're holding on to offenses that you've not shared with your family member, in our world we say, if you've not come to me with the offense, it doesn't exist. I will say this, be ready. If you do step in and have that conversation, they might come back at you with some unhealthy things that they see in you. And so you've got to be humble, loving, and ready for the conversation. I don't think you should create a boundary without having a biblical conversation first.
Yeah.
I don't.
Why does a boundary line need to be drawn up? Even the term to me is, it's like, that's your property, this is my property, stay off.
Johnny, I think healthy boundaries are good because for mental wellness.
Healthy boundaries are great.
And heartness, and they're like,
no doubt.
Okay, of the two of us, I have to have some boundaries just for my well-being, to be able to function as a healthy mom and wife in my home first. There are some things that I've had to say, okay, I can't do that every day of the week. I can only see that person once a month. I can only see that person. There are some things that for myself, we're not saying be a doormat and let people walk all over you. What we're saying is don't cut people out of your life.
You need your own family time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of time. If you're caught up on every show on Netflix that ever existed and you're writing a question about boundaries right now, stop it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And here's the other deal. We're going here in the next sermon series.
Okay.
And I think bigger than the church needing to say, we got to talk about sexual identity and how it's destroying church. No, we got to talk about gossip and slander and not doing Matthew 18. That's what's killing our church.
That's true. It's killing families.
Biblical community is the greatest need in America, because biblical community is the sanctification that happens after justification. And everyone wants to be made just right, salvation in Jesus. But we want nothing to do with the hard work of being around people and someone saying, hey, you know, when you talk like that, it's what's hurting you at work and in your relationship with your spouse. That's why your kids are this way.
I mean,
we don't want that.
We don't.
So you know what we do? Well, I'm going to make a boundary.
Yeah.
And we've boundaried ourselves into no one can say anything to me
Well,
ever.
you bounded yourself into holding on to an offense that's allowing you to sin.
Yes.
If you've not dealt with if you've got an undealt with problem between you and a grandfather and a grandmother or whoever the person is, again, you're harboring sin, and that's going to absolutely poison your well. It's going to poison you.
Always point people back to Jesus. Like if I've made you mad right now, because I can see how everything I said, if you wrote this, made you mad.
That's a lot.
You know, it is, because I'm not so sure that people are hearing what the Word of God is saying when we like say it unlike Paul. I said it like Paul said it, maybe even less hard. So let me point you to the kindness and gentleness and lowliness of Jesus. Jesus practiced boundaries.
He did.
And he said, I'm going away. And
he went away to desolate.
And matter of fact,
desolate. I love that.
Here's what he did.
Desolate places.
I'm going to leave in the morning without a note, and my cell phone is turned off, and you won't find me.
I love it.
That's what Jesus did.
He did. But he came back.
But guess what? It was after he spent an entire day pouring himself out.
Yes, we love that episode on The Chosen. I think it's in season 2, where he is out
Comes
all
back
day.
at
The disciples are sitting around the fire at the night,
Arguing.
complaining and arguing, and they're tired and they're wondering where Jesus is at. He comes in exhausted, literally blood, sweat, and tears. And his mother gently takes him and wipes the dirt from his hands and the hard work from him. It's a beautiful moment of God's pouring out. That's what we're called to.
That's why it's such a beautiful picture of how we should create boundaries, because Jesus created boundaries.
Yeah.
But if you're creating boundaries and you're never pouring yourself out for the people, you're like, hey, don't cross this boundary, then it's an inappropriate boundary.
That's the end of it.
Oh my goodness. And I'm going to have to take that personally and evaluate that. Hey, we say these because we love you.
And I think you got to be careful. Like these conversations, we get in trouble because we are so straightforward. In our family, we're known as the ones who cut to the chase. Are we willing to receive that cut to the chase? So I think if you're gonna get to the hard conversation, you gotta be ready to have them come back at you, and that's not always easy. So we invite you into a world of not taking up offense, but be ready for the opposite side to have a story that comes back to you, and be graceful.
May the things we're saying be seated in love to you, but founded in the Scripture of God, the Word of God. And you take these things to the Father, who knows more about your situation than we do. These are blanket questions, and we don't know the complexity or the nuances or the pain.
No, but we know that the Word of God says to live it in unity.
He does.
That's not just church. That's home, to the best of your ability. So there's a version of unity that you can bring, even if the other side is not bringing unity.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out what that is. That's hard.
Because your unity could mean we're not at war, it's just awkward. Well, awkward is better than war.
Right.
And you could bring awkward, which is actually a step up from all that war.
And really, at the end of it, if you're loving each other through whatever this situation, if you care more about that person as you're supposed to more than you yourself, then it's going to come out on the right side. So
we can't wait to see you this
Mother's
weekend
Day.
At church.
Yep.
Or, it might not be Mother's Day when you're watching this podcast about parenting. But whatever it is, go to church this weekend.
Yep.
God bless.